So the Supreme Court not too long ago overturned affirmative action, but the way it was reported was actually a little misleading because when you read the specifics, what you find out is as like a broad category, they got rid of it, but they actually still allow affirmative action to exist in the sense that people can describe how their race has impacted themselves personally on their own journey, and that can be used in, say, a college admissions essay or whatever, and then race can be considered a factor. So it's been a little misreported. It's not that it's totally gone. It's that it's basically like modified in a sense. I guess that's the most accurate way to put it. Well, anyway, so this is something that the right has, cared deeply about for a long time. They've always wanted to get rid of affirmative action. They view it as sort of reverse racism against white people and holding back white people or what have you. Well, Charlie Kirk here was on his radio show, and man, he made an argument that was even a stretch for him. Listen to this.
You really have to wonder, in fact, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. This is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course. That's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no, imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies that turned me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through our policies.
So let's read the tweet one more time when he drops the bomb on us. Charlie Kirk said Joy Reid, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Michelle Obama used affirmative action because they, quote, do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. So they had to, quote, steal a white person's slot. Look, if you want to have a high-minded philosophical discussion about the merits of affirmative action, I think that's a fair thing to debate. I think there are arguments on both sides of that can be rather persuasive. But when you come out and say, again, let's list them again. Joy Reid, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sheila Jackson Lee, Michelle Obama. And he's saying they don't have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously, and they stole a white person's spot. Look at the default assumption there. The default assumption is that all the spots are white people's spots, and the only way you can get in is through affirmative action. And just the idea that, well, obviously you don't have the brain processing power. You're really letting it all hang out there, aren't you, Charlie? You're really letting it all hang out there. And by the way, let's be clear. I've never seen these people grapple in good faith with the counter-arguments to their position on affirmative action. I've never seen them grapple with it in good faith. The most persuasive argument I've seen is like, look, we've had a system for so long that was basically de facto default affirmative action for white people. From the genesis of this country up until, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. The de facto position was there is affirmative action for white people because they held all the positions of power. They had the authority. They had the income and the wealth and the means to be taken seriously and climb the ladder. And so affirmative action was an attempt to redress that grievance in a way where, look, if you're off by 1 or 2 points, maybe 3 points on a test or whatever, we're not going to hold that against you if you're a minority. Because, in other words, the deck was so stacked against you for so goddamn long that if it's 2 or 3 points on a test, it's like, whatever, you're still going to get a spot. Like, that's the idea, that you had to overcome way worse odds. And so basically, even getting 2 or 3 points, lower on a test is like, you kind of got the same grade anyway, because the other people had massive advantages, whereas you had a disadvantage. Now, I do think there are reasonable counter-arguments about, well, you really got to view people as individuals, and it's not just about race, it's also about class and background and personal experience, etc. Like, all those things matter. I think all those things are fair to bring up. But look at the way he thinks about it. The default perspective is, obviously, you stole a white person spot. Really? So you don't realize that your default assumption there is that they're all white people spots? That's your assumption. Your assumption is like, that's how it should be. The default is, yeah, it's all white people spots. If you change anything from that, you're like deviating from the norm. That says so much about his mindset. And bringing up that they don't have the brain processing power. Look, I got problems with Joy Reid. I think she's a terrible commentator. But Ketanji Brown Jackson is brilliant. Nobody denies that. And the point Sheila was making, which he dodged, is like, yeah, maybe I was able to get my foot in the door because of affirmative action, but you bet your ass once I was there, I busted my ass and worked really hard, and I certainly didn't graduate on affirmative action. It gave me an opportunity, and then I took advantage of that opportunity by working hard. That's the point she was making. He dodged that point. All he heard was you got in because of affirmative action, you wouldn't have gotten in without it. They don't have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. Listen, I would put Ketanji Brown Jackson's brain processing power over Charlie Kirk's any day of the week. I don't know his educational background, and honestly, I don't care enough to look it up. But look, his assumption there is basically black woman lacking brain processing power. You're stealing a white person's spot. And honestly, let's go a step further here. What he really would say is any liberal or left of center black woman, you guys are struggling with your brain processing power and you're stealing a white person's slot. Look, I think the policy itself is debatable, but the way that he's talking about it is not. This is not debatable. We see who you are. We see what you're saying. We know what you mean. Basically, he's basically just massive grouping together of like, black women with some degree of notoriety and like, dude, you're stupid. You're stealing a white person's spot and you're stupid. We see what's going on here. Okay, Charlie. Okay. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.